All right, let's just dive right in. These AI coding assistants are one of the biggest leaps forward we've seen in development. They promise to be our own personal engineering team. But for so many of us, the reality feels a little different, right? We're getting buggy, generic code, and it feels like we've totally hit a wall. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to lay out the roadmap to break through that wall and turn your AI from a frustrating tool into a true collaborator. Yeah, and this quote from Chase AI, it just nails that feeling perfectly. It's not that you're bad at prompting, it's that you don't have a clear path to get better. And that's exactly what we're here to fix, to give you that roadmap from level 1 all the way to mastery.
I mean, the gap between what we're promised and what we actually get, it can be massive. We're sold this dream of an instant engineering team, but what we end up with is what people are calling AI Slop. Just generic, uninspired code that needs so much hand-holding, you start wondering if you even saved any time at all. That's the core problem we've got to solve.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. We'll call this Level 1, the prompt engineer. This is where most people start their journey, and honestly, this is where most of us get stuck.
So what's the real issue here? Well, it's that we treat the AI like some kind of blunt instrument, like a command line tool. You give it an instruction, it spits out code. But this one-way street leads to what's called a regression to the mean. The AI just fills in the gaps in your prompt with the most average, most common solution it knows. And the result? You get code that just looks like every other AI-generated project out there. Nothing special.
Ross Mikey puts it kind of bluntly, but he's spot on. Look, the models are so good now that the quality of the code we get back is a direct mirror of the quality of our input, and even more important, our process. The big takeaway here is that we have to level up our process way beyond just writing a decent prompt.
So, that brings us to Level 2, the planner. This is where things get really interesting. The mindset shift here is huge. I mean, we stop just barking commands, and we actually start having a real, deep, collaborative conversation with our AI.
And the secret sauce to unlocking this level, it's a technique that a lot of devs are calling the Ask User Question or Grill Me skill. Instead of just telling the AI what to build, you tell it to interview you about it. You're basically forcing it to become this relentless consultant, poking and prodding at every corner of your idea to build a truly shared understanding.
And we're not talking about just a few simple questions here. Get this. Developer Matt Pocock shared that an AI asked him more than 16 distinct detailed questions about one single feature. It asked about UI layout, document lifecycles, tool shapes, all to avoid making lazy assumptions. This right here is where the magic starts to happen.
Just like Matt says, it forces that conversation. You're no longer just crossing your fingers and hoping the AI gets it, you're working with it to make absolutely sure you're both on the same page about the goals, the trade-offs, and all the complexities before a single line of code is ever generated.
All right, so you've had this amazing, deep conversation with your AI. Now what, right? Where do you go from here? Well, the next step is turning all that talk into a real, professional blueprint for development. And the workflow for this is actually pretty simple, but it is incredibly powerful. So first, you grill the idea. Then, you get the AI to take that whole conversation and formalize it into a proper product requirements document, a PRD, complete with user stories. And finally, you have the AI chop that PRD up into distinct, actionable GitHub issues.
Now, a really important best practice here is something called vertical slices. Instead of building all the UI, then all the backend, you build one feature completely, from the user interface right down to the database. Why? Because it lets you sniff out those nasty integration risks right away instead of at the very end when it's too late.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Look at the horizontal way on the left. You save all the tricky integration stuff for last, where just one tiny problem can totally wreck your project. But the vertical slice method on the right, man, it tackles the hardest parts first, feature by feature, giving you immediate feedback and cutting down the risk like crazy.
Okay, so we've got our plan. It's broken down into these smart vertical slices, but now we got to make sure the AI actually executes it with high quality. And that brings us to level 3, the context engineer, and level 4, the tool integrator.
So one of the biggest silent killers of quality code is this thing called context rot. Just think of the AI's context window like it's short-term memory. And what we're finding is, once that memory gets about 50% full, its performance starts to drop off a cliff. It starts forgetting stuff, making silly mistakes, and the quality just tanks. But the solution, it's actually super simple. You just have to keep an eye on how much context you're using.
The second you see it creeping up into that 50% danger zone, just go ahead and start a fresh session. Seriously, it's one of the easiest ways to keep your AI partner performing at its peak during a long coding session.
Okay, another killer technique for quality control is test-driven development, or TDD for short. It's this really disciplined loop. First, have the AI write a test that fails, red. Then, it writes the absolute bare minimum code to make that test pass, green. And finally, you refactor and clean everything up, knowing that your tests will scream the instant you break something. This loop is just incredible for building a rock-solid, reliable code.
All right, we're getting into the big leagues now, the highest levels of mastery. At this stage, you're not just collaborating on a single task anymore. You are scaling your output by automating whole workflows and, get this, managing multiple AIs at once. Welcome to levels 5 and 6.
See, at this level, you're really shifting from being a coder to being a manager, an orchestrator. You take your best practices, like that grill me skill or the TDD loop, and you turn them into reusable skills you can just call up whenever. And then you scale things up by running multiple AI agents, like separate AI instances, in parallel on different tasks. You're mastering the high-level concepts, not so you can code them yourself, but so you can be an amazing guide for your team of AIs.
But you know, even with all of these incredible technical skills, there's one last piece of the puzzle. Like Ross Mike says, building something people are actually going to use, well, that takes audacity. It takes human taste and vision and the guts to build something truly unique. That's the human part. The AI can't give you that.
So there you have it. That's the journey. You go from being a simple prompt engineer just giving commands, to a planner who has deep conversations, to a context engineer who manages the AI's memory, all the way up to an orchestrator who's managing a whole team of AIs. Each level builds on the last, transforming not just your code, but what you're even capable of creating. You know, we're at this amazing point where the technical hurdles are just melting away. The tool is easy, the code is fast, so the real question isn't how anymore, it's what. What are you going to build? With this roadmap in hand, what kind of truly scroll-stopping software are you going to bring to life?
Quantum paradigm, redefining possibilities.